You know, you can travel a long time and go to a lot of places, but you're going to have a tough time finding any place better than Grindelwald. You might travel the world over, and I doubt that you would ever find a more fantastic spot than Grindelwald. It's so nestled, it's so magnificent, it's so spacious, it's so three-dimensional, it's so incredible. And that leads me to think about something I wanted to mention today. I think you've seen everything in Grindelwald. You come to a church like this, with a cemetery like this, with a backdrop like that, and you begin to wonder, could there be a more beautiful place to live or to die or to be buried than right here in the church at the top of Grindelwald? So imagine that you had this 360-degree view from your house. You're just here. This is where you live. This is what you see. You come around, and then we're getting to the real message now, but she's kind of moving. There's the real message. Hey, you. Do you know you're the real message?
Very bright.
It has to do with something that I'd like to refer to as oneness. In fact, I think I'd like to refer to it as eternal oneness. So, the question I'm going to pose to my darling daughter up here in a little ways has to do with this most amazing, miraculous thing, and with how hard it is to obtain it. So, my daughter Charity, when I say eternal oneness, what do you think of?
God?
Good, perfect. This is the street where Charity may end up living. We don't know.
Didn't expect that question.
I like these spontaneous questions to Charity because she really thinks on her feet, but
I have no idea where this is going to end up.
when I say, eternal oneness, you think of God, but you're also thinking of
Yeah, God's marriage. That's the perfect example of eternal oneness.
So my question is, where would you rank that in terms of its value in obtaining or possessing? And secondly, where would you rank the difficulty and work involved in obtaining it?
Most important and hardest.
So should we be surprised that the most desirable thing in the world is also the hardest to obtain?
Probably not.
Okay, now elaborate a little from there.
Well, like the best university in the world is the hardest one to get into.
There you go.
You know, that kind of thing.
Thanks for the tour of London. I'll carry on now. I don't know that Victoria and Albert's marriage was eternal or that it was oneness, but I do know that they stayed together through thick and thin, and that it was enough, she liked him enough to build him this memorial when he passed on. Now, of course, you do have a queen living here who's been married much longer than Victoria. Going on 60 years for Elizabeth. So, interestingly, incidentally, and maybe somewhat metaphorically to this message a little later on, what's transformed London and Paris and New York and a lot of other cities around the world is not high technology, but low technology. These bikes, people riding bikes. For £2, you get a bike all day if you trade it in every once in a while. So ironically, it's the old-fashioned ideas that have really served to save London. So the concept of equality in marriage, equality as a general concept is basically flawed. I mean, I guess these spikes on this London fence are equal, right? No, wait a minute. If you look closely, some are a little taller than others. We better make some adjustments here. We better get the fence repair guy in. There's a little bit of inequality here along this fence. So contrast that difficult equality concept with the concept of oneness. Here are some bicycles. Are the front and rear wheels equal? I don't think so. One's connected to a front brake, one to a rear brake. One is the power wheel with the sprocket and the gears, and the other one's the guiding wheel. They're not equal, but they're one. The bicycle is one. It needs them both together. They are one. So I've been thinking a lot about things that last, things that endure, things that get old and get more valuable with the passage of time. Trafalgar Square's been there a long time. St. Martin's in the Field, been there a long time. It's taken a lot of repairs. It's taken a lot of maintenance. It's taken a lot of revamping, but it's there. It's still there. And it gets better as time goes by. Even shoes can be like that. It's a pair of English shoes I bought the other day. Interestingly, they're made on something called a last. These shoes have a lifetime guarantee. When they begin to wear out, you bring them back, and this shoe company refurbishes them free of charge or with a minimal charge. Things that last, things that endure, things that don't go away. We live in a society that seems to have so many disposables. Disposable dishes, disposable jobs, disposable lifestyles, disposable marriages. Somehow we have to find and learn the lesson that things that last, if they're maintained well, if they're valued, if they were good to start out with in the first place, those are the things that grow in value. Those are the things that can't be replaced. And sometimes it seems so easy to throw them away, but it's worth the hardness, it's worth the effort to maintain them, to keep them going, to never let them die or fade, to make them last forever. I mean, you know that the divorce rate on second marriages, third marriages, far higher, twice as high as on first marriages. People give up. People say, well, it's not working well, it's a little hard right now. We don't see eye to eye. We're too different from each other. We have irreconcilable differences. Now, I'm not here to say there aren't some situations when divorce is necessary, when divorce is the best course. But so many times marriages end without all the effort that could have been put in, without the repair effort, without the serious attempt to fix things. And sometimes it takes a long time. But if you consider, if you think about your marriage as something eternal, and you've had a rocky time for 20 years, that's a blip in time. That's a drop in the ocean. This is something that can last forever. And if it takes 20 years to repair it, then how much stronger will it be? And how much more chance will there be that it can last for an eternity and that it can gain this oneness? Oneness is a difficult concept. Oneness takes endless adjustments and thought processes, and it goes on and on. But if you hear the bell there in St. Martin's right now, the steeple, it reminds you that these things can be done. Don't give up. You never fail in a marriage until you give up. The time of failure in a marriage is the moment when you give up. Until then, the marriage is still alive. It may be in trouble, it may be needing resuscitation, but you haven't failed until you give up. I know a lot of things change, and some changes, I suppose, are good. There's the old roller coaster, and there's the new one. But some things shouldn't change, and one of them is the commitment and fidelity of marriage. I think I'll ask Noah the same question I asked to Charity the other day. See if he gives the same answer. Noah, what do you think is the most valuable thing you can have in this life? And you can have it whether you're a spiritual person or not. You can have it. Anyone who really wants it can probably obtain it. And it has to do with two being better than one.
Has to do with two being better than one?
Yeah.
Yeah, companion. I was going to say the knowledge of the Savior and a companion. Both those things.
All right, great. I agree. A oneness marriage. And the second question is, what do you think is the hardest thing on earth to obtain? I'll give you a clue. It's the same answer.
Yeah.
Now, back to our discussion of things that last, that really last. You can talk about shoes, you can talk about buildings, you can talk about old churches, but let's shift to something that really lasts. How about the mountains around us? How about the things that God has made? How about the things that seemingly will last forever? There's a song called "Firm as the mountains around us, stalwart and great they stand." And when you look at mountains like this, when you look at cliffs like this, it does give you a feeling that some things are permanent. And if God can make these mountains to last, is it possible that God can make a marriage that lasts, continually lasts, that continually gets stronger and more united and more synergistic and more one? Incidentally, and this will have to be the subject of another video for another time, the marriages that I believe can last forever are actually performed by the authority not of a court or of a state or of man, but of God, and they're performed in what we call temples, not to be confused with, although perhaps having some things in common with this temple in Zion's National Park. The majesty of it, especially from a bike, is overwhelming. It's otherworldly. And the extraordinary feeling that you get is simply that only God can make something like this. And only God can create a marriage that will last as long as these cliffs. When God is brought into a marriage through prayer, through faith, through the simple acknowledgement of his miracles, through a belief in Christ and an atonement that can forgive and that can fix sins, when this happens, everything changes. Everything becomes bigger. Everything becomes more lasting, more meaningful, more possible. You know, it's standing beneath rocks like the Great White Throne or the other magnificent cliffs here that make you feel small, make you feel insignificant, make you really aware of your own nothingness. And it's like a minor feeling compared to looking out at the night sky, but it's feelings like this, it's humility like this that draws us into not a can-do attitude, but a can't-do attitude, an acknowledgement that to build a perfect relationship over eternity, to obtain oneness in a marriage, is not something we can do, but something we can do as a three-way partnership when the managing partner is our Creator. The horizons broaden. The very sky seems to lengthen. Things that seem impossible start to feel possible. Against an eternal backdrop, disagreements and irritations start to look small, and differences begin to actually look like opportunities for synergy. In this paradigm, where you're thinking of marriage as a commitment for life, even a commitment beyond life, when that paradigm occurs, the paths seem to straighten out, and bridges seem to appear across difficulties and across problems. Because with this longer range perspective, you're not just thinking of yourselves as marriage partners or as parents. You're thinking of yourself as grandparents. You're thinking of yourself on into the distance as matriarchs and as patriarchs. A disagreement or a fight doesn't suggest the need to walk away, but now with a perspective of an eternal commitment, of a lifetime commitment, difficulties, fights, disagreement, just suggest the need to work harder, to draw down more power from heaven. But this kind of thinking, this higher and deeper perspective, is not possible for two individuals, separate individuals. Even when they try to create an equal partnership, it becomes possible only in a paradigm of oneness, only when two people begin to understand that their total together can be greater than the sum of their parts. This is what we call oneness. And of course it would be foolish for me to pursue that oneness concept any further without the other part of the oneness. So let's get Linda involved here. So Linda, I guess the thing you hadn't realized is that during this last month while we've been traveling, I've been taking little video clips because I've been trying to get in the mood to talk about this thing called oneness in marriage.
Oh,
You didn't know I was filming little clips, did you?
no, I'm not surprised though.
You're
At all.
not surprised. And I was thinking, you know, we're right now in a desert location and Linda's working on the final stages of a book written to grandmothers.
Yes, in fact, Richard just can't wait to talk to you about this until I get the book done in 2 days. But we do talk about oneness a lot.
Well, and you know, I was thinking this little video thing is the exact opposite of a book. Because with a book, you're constantly editing, finalizing, polishing, getting it exactly right. And we don't do it, maybe you've noticed, we don't do that on these videos.
It is true. It is so painstaking to do a book. Every time I do one, I think, why are you doing this? Remind yourself, never do this again. You really enjoy it, and I enjoy the writing, but then the polishing and the, mind-blowing stuff of getting it just right, because it's going to be in ink. I mean, it's going to be written permanently.
Yeah.
And so it's hard, but it's fun.
But the point is, these little YouTube videos, no rehearsal, total spontaneity, no editing, no polishing. I guess that'll probably show.
As you can tell, yeah.
But it is important to think about how this oneness thing has evolved for us, because should we just reveal how old we are? I mean, in another year and a half, we are going to have our 50th wedding anniversary.
We are.
Now that
amazing.
doesn't look like a woman who could be that far along,
Well,
but
don't
she
get
was
too
only
close.
10 when we got married.
Right, for sure. But it is amazing that that time has passed. Time is amazing. I mean, you think your days are going to last forever when you're a kid and things will never end.
Yeah.
And life seems so long. And it is long because you can get a lot done in a year.
Well, and so really this video, you could think of this as kind of a preface or a lead up to we're going to release a book. We're going to make it. We got to release it on our anniversary.
Don't talk to me about another book right now.
Okay, that's right. You got to rest, but on our anniversary, on that 50th anniversary, we're going to release this book on oneness. So you might want to think of this little video as kind of a preview.
Yes, aren't you so excited? This is amazing.
Let's pick this up when we get back inside.
Yes, all right. Let's pick this up.
But let's return for a minute to that interesting dichotomy, that interesting contrast between the concept of equality and the concept of oneness. Is the rock equal to the sky, or are they one? And does the contrast make them more one or less one? So, Linda, the sky and the rock,
Right.
they're not equal, they're different, they're very different.
They're as different as they can be.
Yeah.
I think you're the sky and I'm the rock. You're ethereal and artistic, and there's no problem with anything. And I'm the rock
You're the rock.
that gets things
Rock, paper, scissors.
done. It really is true that they're very different, but what would we be without all of that together?
Well, and the way they blend together in that clip, I mean, the beauty of the contrast between the rock and the sky. And that makes me think of that yin and yang, that perfect circle diagram. How would you describe it?
Well, it's just a round circle, but there's a wavy line through it, and it fits together like a puzzle. And that's the way relationships are that are really one. It doesn't mean that we're the same. It doesn't even mean that we're equal.
Probably
It
means we're
that
not the same.
we are who we are. I mean, some women really push back on this when they say oneness. No, I am myself. I am not one with my husband. I need myself. And it really, it's really important to understand that you're part of a circle.
Well, and that's what I like about that yin and yang diagram. There are the two distinct parts, but they're not a perfect circle until they're put together.
Right.
And they're each an entity, but it becomes another entity, a more perfect one when they're combined. By the way, it just occurred to me, if you take a baseball and turn it just the right way, the seam on the baseball does the same thing, and that is the diagram of the yin and the yang.
Really?
I had to say that because it is the World Series this month.
Right. And, well, you're dating yourself. So
I'm dating myself. No, I'd like to date you.
No, it's the time of the World Series. Anyway, it's not a ping pong ball where they're just smooth and there's no variation at all. It's not like that at all. I mean, that doesn't mean you have to quit. Women don't have to quit being irritated at things that your husband does. We have a friend, Craig Zwick, who gave a great talk recently about a woman, mother or grandmother, I don't know, who actually started keeping a list on her phone of things that were irritating.
Oh, what a good idea
about her husband. It
What
is
a great
really
idea.
a good idea. In fact, I've done it.
Oh.
And then she realized after she got this big list, she was thinking, if I show him this, he'll get it. He'll know what it is that I'm doing that's irritating, that he's doing.
Oh, bad mistake.
But she did realize that was not going to work. It was only going to make things worse. And she told him all this stuff that was irritating. So she went back to her phone, and it took her a while to dare to
Push the button about select all.
select and then select all. I mean, she
And
could have
then-
just selected a few, but she selected all, and then even longer.
And she
to
really paused before she pushed
delete.
delete.
And I really like that story because, some things never change. I've been trying to change things about you for 50 years.
And
It doesn't work.
And that's the breakthrough, is realizing that you don't crave sameness. You don't obtain oneness by becoming the same. You don't, although you know, people do say that the longer you live together, the more you start to look like each other and so on and act like you. I'm waiting for that to happen, by the way. I'd like to look a little more like you. But that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is creating this new entity which is actually stronger and broader and more capable and more synergistic because because the two halves of it are different. And because you bring certain things to this oneness, to this circle, I bring certain things which you may never have. I may never have yours to this oneness. So it's really, it's a thing about thinking in a different way. Still think of yourself as yourself, and I think of myself as myself, but there's this other thing, this oneness, this entity that is, it's not one, you know, if you were the same as me, 1 + 1 would equal 1. But as differences, synergy, 1 + 1 might equal 3 or 5 or 10 or infinity.
Yeah, and I think it is a matter of feeling like you are in it for a long, long time, forever
yeah,
for us.
It's
I
the
mean,
commitment.
it's the commitment that really matters. And I think if you feel committed to that ball, but you can still remain yourself,
Yeah.
then that's the best of all worlds.
So we've talked about this circle. Now let's talk a little about a triangle, and let's move to a little different location where we can actually maybe get back to this rock and sky thing a little bit more.
Oh, I'm married to a husband that gets things in his mind, and man, I can't wait to see this next
We'll
section.
see. You know, speaking of oneness, we kind of love Navajo rugs, and these are little yebiches. And they are actually, the weaver of this rug tried to make them all exactly the same. And here's another one, a yebiche rug. And you see those 12 little yays are all the same, except on this one, if you look closely, there's little differences. And the differences become what makes the rug interesting. The differences, the subtle differences, create a wonderful oneness, even though each of the yebiches are slightly different. In some cases, the more you look, quite dramatically different. But here's our favorite. This is Mother Earth and Father Sky. And there's no attempt here by the weaver to make these the same. In fact, his intent, or her intent, is to make them different, to make them complementary, to make them synergistic. So this is a picture not of sameness or equality, but of oneness. And we'll finish the video in front of this rug. So speaking of Navajo rugs and of the sky and the rock.
Wait, you weren't speaking of Navajo
Yeah, I
rugs.
did, because I'm putting in a clip in here that you don't know about.
Oh,
We happen to have this Navajo rug behind us, which has a title. It has a name. Father Earth.
no,
and
Mother Earth, of
Mother
course.
Earth and Father
Father
Sky.
Sky.
So you were right earlier when you said you were the rock and I was the
That is
the
interesting.
Sky.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
We like this Indian rug. It's very symbolic because, look, they're holding hands.
They're holding hands. Yeah.
Put that up
They're-
so you can see it a little bit better.
Look at that. There they are.
And there.
They're pretty. They have an interesting shape.
Yeah, that's kind of like me a little bit.
Not a bit like you. Okay, so the point is, there is a way to really work toward this oneness, and even though if you're as different as Father Sky and Mother Earth, and if you'd quit bumping me with your elbow, that would be really
Okay,
good
good.
too. So the way to do it is, first of all, like we said earlier, think about this oneness. Just find a new paradigm where you're both yourselves, but you are also this bigger thing, this perfect circle, this oneness. And just getting that thought in your mind is sort of the final commitment. It's like that's who we are forever, and we're going to work on perfecting. We're going to work on our own qualities, but we're mainly going to work on perfecting that circle, that oneness, so that it becomes something that can last forever.
So, probably have not known a lot of people who disagree with each other more than we do. We do everything
That's
differently.
part of the oneness, right?
So when I'm really mad at you for doing something that seems silly to me, then how does that fit in the circle?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think it goes back to our friends that we had some friends in their 90s, and the guy was actually 97, and I wanted to know how he lived to be so old, and I said, "What's the secret of longevity?" And he told me this crazy thing. He said, way back 63 years ago or whatever it was when my wife and I got married, we made a promise to each other we would never fight or argue within the walls of our own home. And then you can do the punchline. But first of all, I was like, well, I asked about how you lived to be so old. Must not have heard me.
And he said, that's why I've lived so long. We've spent so much time in the out of doors. I like that story.
So they would go outside. When they had an argument in their own home, they didn't want that to pollute the feeling of their house. So they literally would go outside whenever they had an argument until they worked it out.
Yeah, now we used to stay up all night. Somebody told us to never go to bed on an argument. Oh my gosh, we'd stay up all night. We were no farther ahead when we got done at 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning.
It was
Anyway,
the guy
that
that
was-
married us, actually.
that was
Remember,
bad
his
advice.
advice was
Yeah.
never let the sun set on a disagreement.
Yeah,
So we were up all night for the first
but
little
except
while.
we never figured out the sun had already set.
That's
So
true.
why did we keep going anyway?
That's true. So we modified that.
Right.
And we said never let the weekend without resolving things. And so Sunday for us have become pretty important.
Right. So we try to have a little meeting on Sunday so that we can get the air cleared. And there are so many things to talk about when all the kids were home during that time. Now, I might say, Richard, this week you did something that really made me feel bad and sad. And you kind of knew it, but I want to really tell you how I felt. And so then I tell you how I feel. Then you say, oh, I didn't even realize that sometimes. And then you say, okay, all right, noted, I'll be better next time. So they're just, it doesn't always work out that fast and that perfectly, but there are just a lot of things that you can do to work things out if you talk about them.
And I guess part of this, I mentioned earlier, we're going to shift from a circle to a triangle. And what I meant by that is, if you think of a triangle, then, we could almost use these guys. They're sort of triangular.
Maybe
Well,
they're sideways
diamond.
squares.
They're
They're diamonds, yeah.
But if you think of a triangle, and if you think of you on one bottom corner and your spouse on the other bottom corner, and you think of God or a higher power at the top of that triangle, then what's really interesting is that you try to draw closer to each other across the bottom base of the triangle. But if you both are trying to draw closer to God, moving up from this side, moving up from this side, like this, then what happens is that you get closer and closer and closer and closer to each other as you move up. And I think that what that brings up is a key to oneness is praying together. It's fine to have individual prayers, but praying together is actually a form of communication between the two of us, don't you think?
Right.
I learn things about you listening to your prayer. You say things to God in a way that is different than you can say them to me, and I learn from that.
I know. I have to admit that I used to start out by saying, please help this person know how ridiculous he is.
Oh, that's
And
what we were
then-
praying after an argument, right?
After an argument. And then suddenly my heart softened and I realized, you know what, the problem really is just as much me as it is him. And so that is a really interesting thing to work through.
And there is a kind of a triangular way of praying that might appeal to you. It certainly helps us and works for us, and that is we don't just have one person pray, we do it together. Like Linda might start the prayer, and when she reaches a point where she's done, there would be a little squeeze of the hand, and I would pick up the dialogue, part of the prayer, and back and forth. And so it really seems more like a meeting, a three-way partnership, with God being the managing partner,
Right,
and us trying to get our act together with his help.
right. So is this the end?
I don't know. Do you feel like we've covered oneness?
I do think we have. And so
Everyone has to figure it out on their own. Isn't that the interesting thing?
Yeah.
Oneness is, there's no one size fits all. I think the main thing of this whole video is to suggest that you adopt a goal, not of equality, but of oneness. And you'll find within that oneness the greatest equality that could ever exist.
Right. And it's a lot of fun while you're discovering it too. So we wish you the best of luck. Good luck on your oneness.
Good luck. We're with you all the way.